right, so what we're looking at when we do APMC analysis is we are looking at a thought process that we have to take, okay? So if you look at your APMC tracker, you're going to see different types of questions, right? Notice there are 6 types of questions: syntax, author's purpose, vocab and context, grammar, evidence for inferences, and knowledge of terminology. Every time you have a question on the APMC, you have to label it what type of question, okay? Now, for the most part, there is a right or wrong answer, okay? I'm not going to grade you on whether you have the correct answer type of question or not. You just need to constantly see whatever you're going to label that type of question. Does that make sense? If you always see this type of question as a inferencing question, then always label that type of question an inferencing question, okay? Inferencing and author's purpose, they're going to be very similar, but I'll show you in our questions today which one is which, okay? All right, so let's look at question number 1. What would you, read it, what would you say, what type of question do you think this is? Vocab and context is, this is the word in context, what does it mean? Author's purpose could be, I could go with author's purpose for this one, but we're going to look at author's purpose as being the toughest questions ever.
Is it knowledge of terminology?
I would probably say it would be closer to knowledge of terminology. Okay, so look at what we're going to do. We're going to say question number 1. And we're going to actually label it. Knowledge of terminology. So, for every question you miss, now no, we're going to do this for all of them today. But when you do it normally, you're just going to do it for the questions you miss.
Are we writing this on the notebook?
Notebook paper, yep. This is your analysis. So, knowledge of terminology. First of all, you need to label the question and label what type of question it is. Okay? Now, look at the question. It talks about lines 5 through 15. So, the very first thing I have to do is I'm going to paraphrase lines 5 through 15. And you actually have to write this. Like, you actually have to write paraphrase lines 5 through 15. Okay, and then you're going to go in and you're going to paraphrase lines 5 through 15. Don't do squiggly marks because you'll actually need to do that later. We're just not going to take the time to do it right now. Does that make sense? Okay, so now I paraphrase it. Because this is a knowledge of terminology, what do you think I need to do next? Do what? Yep. So then I need to define the terminology. So I need to define, and I'm going to actually say here, I'm going to define and what type of evidence is used. Because this one, I would define an emotional appeal. And I would define ethical. And I would define logical. And here, I want definitions. Like dictionary definitions, rhetorical term type definitions. I do not want your definition. I want I want the denotation. I want the like Webster's dictionary, right? Or your rhetorical term sheet definition. This is not, let me guess what it means. Okay, so I need a true definition there. Okay. The other thing, notice that I put for this one, and you may not need them for all when you're defining like an anaphora, you may not need it. But for this one, I need to know like what types of evidence are used to create those appeals, right? So for an emotional appeal, you would have anecdotes, right? You would have personal stories, right? For ethos or to create an ethical appeal, you would have use of first person, you would have like a calming tone to it, right? So you would do all those, okay? So now that we have those, then I need to say, so which one is used because that's kind of what the question is asking, and I need to provide evidence. So let's say I would say emotional. And then I would give a quote, and I would say lines 42 through 44. Right? And then I would say ethical. Then I'd give a quote, and then I would say lines 23 through 25. Whatever it is, right? Does that make sense so far? Do y'all see my thought process? Okay. And then at the end, I need a reflection. So basically, you're going to have to tell me why your answer is wrong. Why did you miss it? Right? And I need more than, like, I just stink at these questions. Right? I need more than that. Sorry, I'm making it focused. Okay? So I need more than just that. Sometimes it'll be, I misread the question. I didn't know what this answer choice meant, so I left it out and didn't choose it, right? So you need to be honest with yourself why you think you missed that question. And it needs to be more than I'm terrible at this type of question. Okay? So you need to have some kind of reflection of why we do that. That's all for one question. Do you see why it took so long? Yes? Okay. All right, good. So let's go to question number 2. All right. So looking at question number 2 and looking at your types of questions, what would you say this type of question is? Look at what it's asking. It could be author's purpose. It could also be evidence for inferencing. I'm going to tell you those two are really kind of similar, right? And the types of questions, those are actually the 2 hard ones, the 2 hardest questions that you'll have, right? So you just need to get in your head if you're going to label these types of questions author's purpose or inferencing. I'm looking at it, and I'm looking at serves as an illustration of. I have to infer what it is an illustration of. Does that make sense? When you'll see author's purpose here in a little bit, it's more tone, it's more why did they do this, right? So it's a little bit different type of question, but I again, like I said, you could fight for it to be author's purpose. Does that make sense to y'all? Okay, so we're going to label question number 2. We're going to go with my answer. Sorry, Justin. We're going to label it evidence for inferencing. Okay, so what do I need to do first? Yep. Paraphrase lines 11 through 13. And I'm going to separate it because, first of all, it asks for the paraphrase, it asks for the lines, and then talks about the list. And then I'm going to say what is listed. And this needs to be, again, in your own words. Right? So you're going to look at what's listed and you're going to say, okay, paraphrase that really, right? Then you're going to do paraphrase lines 32 through 35. And then again, you're going to say what is listed. Does it make sense? Do you see where my brain is going? I have a very weird brain, but do you understand where my brain is going? We'll talk in a little bit, like after we go through this, why we're doing all this, because it's insane. It's not just a torture. Okay. All right, so we can't just stop there. Now we still have to answer the question. The question says, what does it serve? Those 2 things serve as an illustration of. So then I would ask, like, what do they have in common? And I would look at, I'm not necessarily looking at the answer choices per se, right? I'm really looking at what I have now provided. Now, when you say what do they have in common, you can kind of look and see that it would probably match one of your answers. Does that make sense? And then you're going to write a reflection. Yes?
In your reflection, are you more or less arguing why you got it wrong or why you got it right?
Well, you're only doing for the ones you got wrong, right? After today, like after this, like when you do them normally. Yeah, I mean, kind of. I want you to look at and really honestly tell yourself, okay, what did you see in that first answer? So like, why was that first answer wrong? And what did you do wrong? It's really a reflection of you, right? And I can't tell you whether you're right or wrong. Like, I'm not going to grade you on whether that's right or wrong, but I just need a true and honest reflection of, like, I skimmed that section and I didn't really see the lists, or I really only looked at one list and didn't look at the second list. Does that make sense? So it's really a reflection of you, right? This is like a self-improving process. Okay. Do you see why it takes so long to do this? Okay. All right. So let's go to question number 3. What would you say question number 3 is? I would probably say knowledge of terminology, yeah, because you have to understand what an ascendant is. Somebody last class actually said syntax, and I could go with syntax too, right? Because really it's looking at what is the purpose of the ascendant, right? So again, I'm not going to grade you, like score you down on this answer sheet if you choose something different than the way that I see it. As long as you continue to label it that way in all of your stuff, right? And you can actually prove it through your thought process. Does that make sense? So just label this one knowledge of terminology. We're not going to do it because I've already done a knowledge of terminology for you. Does that make sense? So just label it on your page or on the sheet itself. All right, so let's look at question number 4. What would you label this one? Okay, so let's talk about the difference between syntax and grammar. Syntax is more the purpose of a structure. Grammar is you're going to look at grammatical terminology. And there's 2 types of questions. It can be a grammatical term, but looking at the purpose of it. Right? This is purely just really what? Grammar. Yeah. So I would label this one so question number 4. I would label grammar. Okay, what do you think I need to do first?
No.
What's the grammar term? Yeah, I need to define antecedent. Now, again, if you paraphrased it first, I'm totally okay with that. Because actually what we're going to do next is paraphrase. And because we're talking about an antecedent, we need to paraphrase more than just that line. We need to paraphrase probably 14 through 16. Do we know what an antecedent is? The word that comes before something? Yes. An antecedent is like a pronoun that renames something, or a renaming of something else. Like Mr. McDaniel, comma, former Boyd principal, comma, the Boyd principal is the antecedent. Like it renames something else. Okay? Okay. So then I do that. Then what do you think I need to do next? To understand who the antecedent is about, then I need to basically say, who is the sentence about? Because in that, what the antecedent would do is to rename it, right? So then I need to look back and say, okay, lines 14 through 16, who was I talking about here? That's usually going to be the antecedent. Okay? And then reflection. Okay? All question number 5. What type of question would you say this is? I would say author's purpose. And notice that this is kind of what makes me move to author's purpose. Okay? So question number 5. You have author's purpose. All right, so what do you think I have to do? Paraphrase first. So we paraphrase lines 16 through 17. Now what do you think? Now, because it's asking about tone, I would say here you can do positive or negative tone, just looking from your paraphrase. Right? It's either good or bad. Now what do I need to do? Define. Yep. So then I would define the tone. So I would define insincerity, appreciation, indifference, reassurance, discouragement. Good question. You're allowed to have dictionaries the first semester. Second semester, I'll take them away. And really, you don't have time. Right? The day of the exam, no, you cannot use them. Yeah. Okay, so now that you've defined them, now the next question is, okay, and I would probably, since you did positive or negative up here, I would probably maybe go, that's a negative, this is positive, this is negative, this is positive, this is negative. So then automatically it shows you that you have some to mark out, right? If you've decided that it's positive up here, then you are not looking at these negative tones. Does that make sense? And again, I need the dictionary definition because we're about language, so I need you to truly understand what these words mean. And again, on APMCs, you're going to have probably tougher tone words than these. Okay? So then, finally, I need you to ask yourself, okay, which one is the most accurate? And provide me evidence to show it. So what's the correct answer for this one? Okay, so if you say reassurance, then I need you to show me examples of how he creates reassurance. Does that make sense? And what you've really done right there is you've done a rhetorical analysis. So I'm forcing you to rhetorically analyze, but also look at the process of how you're thinking. Make sense? Okay. Question number 6. What would you label it? Look at the answer choices. I'll show you. We don't have any vocab and context today, but I'll show you. But this is not vocab and context. I would say knowledge of terminology, yeah. Because you're looking at a euphemism, you need to understand what a euphemism is. You need to understand what does it mean by specific details. You need to understand what cause and effect is. You need to understand the difference between compare and contrast, first person point of view. Like you need to know those terms. So just jot that down, that number 6 is knowledge of terminology. What about number 7? What would you say question number 7 is? I would say it would be syntax. Because what I'm looking at is it's looking at the independent clause, but what is it showing? And why I would say it wouldn't be author's purpose is because I'm looking at the independent clause. Okay. So question number 7. Syntax.
For question number 5, do we have to do a reflect at the end?
Yes, sorry. Yes, you should do a reflection for question number 5. Yeah, you're always going to end with a reflection. Good question. All right, so what do you think I need to do first for question number 7? You can paraphrase, yep. So paraphrase lines 43 through 44. Then what? Yep, define independent clause. Okay, then I think I'm going to have to identify the independent clause is. Right, because it says clauses, so there are at least more than one. Right, at least 2. And then the question says, what is it showing? So then I have to look at what is its purpose. Right? And then reflection. Okay. Question number 8. What would you say? It's not vocab and context because he's not. If vocab and context means, what does the word we mean in context? Right? Or he would say like secure. What does the word secure mean in this passage? That would be like vocab and context, right? They seem easy, but really they're not. It could be syntax because you're looking, but you're not really looking at structure. You're just looking at the repetition, right? I would say either author's purpose or inference, but for here I would say purpose because this language right here serves to. That is purpose, right? What does it serve to do? What is it supposed to do, right? That's purpose. So question 8 would be purpose. And notice what I did here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make these a yellow page for you. Last class said that they want these as a yellow page. So keep your questions and then I'll print you out these and then you'll put your questions and these together in your yellow pages. So when we do it later, you have a reference for how to break it down, right? So this is what I did for author's purpose then. I just went through and I said, okay, count how many times he uses we, count how many times he uses our, what's the purpose of his speech, first of all. And then how do these words help further his purpose? When you talk about author's purpose, if you have any author's purpose questions, you have to go back and identify what is the purpose of the speech in order to understand the author's purpose questions. Does that make sense? And then I have more. 9 is evidence for inferences, and 10 is author's purpose again. Questions?